Pamela Rivers, 10 years old, barefoot, clothes stiff from sleeping under the I-94 overpass, kept her eyes low. "Sir, I only wanted the scraps." Pamela studies his posture, sees the nerve pattern, and quietly says, "Your left hip. Your nerve is collapsing. You need to sit differently or get worse." Michael laughs, offended a street kid dared to diagnose him. Then he fires back. "Oh yeah. Heal my dead legs for $1 million. Laughter exploded across the patio. Pamela flinched, but not from the insult. She'd seen that same tiny leg shift, that same hidden grimace, the exact micro-twitch her father made the night he died. She whispered, barely audible, "I know what that is." Cameras kept recording. Michael waved her off, still laughing. No idea what was about to happen. If this story grips you, like and subscribe to the channel to support our growth, because tomorrow's story gets wilder. Now, let's begin. 30 minutes earlier. 3:15 p.m. Pamela had followed the warm scent of roasted salmon and garlic butter drifting 6 blocks from the old overpass she called home. Spring sun didn't burn, but it didn't erase the hunger either. Hunger lived deeper than weather. The Westford Country Club rose ahead like a palace, white stone, gold trim, windows spilling warm light. People inside who had never frozen under a bridge. People who had never watched someone slip away on cold concrete. Pamela slipped behind the building toward the service path. The dumpster area was quiet, just buzzing flies and a recycling bin stuffed with glossy magazines and discarded brochures. She dug past cardboard and wilted menus until she found something priceless. A torn physical therapy manual. Pages water-stained, edges frayed. A diagram circled in red marker, sacral lumbar emergency release. She smoothed the page on the ground and traced the angles with her thumb. She'd memorized 30 books like this, watched hundreds of hospital procedures through glass, whispered medical terms to herself by moonlight. Her father's death had carved those words into her bones. 15 feet away, through a gap in decorative shrubs, the patio unfolded like another planet. 12 tables under swaying lights, crystal glasses clinking, millionaires in pastel shirts laughing at jokes no one else would find funny. At the head table sat a man in a carbon frame wheelchair. Michael Schmidt. Late 50s. A real estate empire behind him and a nerve injury beneath him. Pamela watched the subtle shifts in his posture. The way he eased weight off his left hip. The sharp inhale he tried to hide. The kneading fingers pressing into the same spot her father used to clutch when the pain took him. The exact same. She didn't know then that fate was walking her straight toward that table. But she stepped out of the trees anyway, and the world of the Westford patio collided with the girl from under the overpass. And as Pamela approached, hunger dragging her forward, the memory of her father's final night began to rise, ready to break open. The memory rose like a storm, uninvited, unstoppable, pulling Pamela backward into the night everything ended. 1 year earlier, winter had swallowed the city whole. Wind knifed through the alleys, rattling metal signs, cutting through clothing as if fabric were only an idea. Pamela walked close beside her father, Terrence Rivers, their footsteps crunching over frost-stiff cardboard and crumpled newspapers. He limped heavily on his left side again, worse than the night before. Worse than the week before that. Pamela kept glancing up at him, her small hand wrapped around 2 of his calloused fingers. "Daddy, you okay?" He forced a smile, the kind parents used when they didn't want their children to know things were going wrong. "It's just a pinch, baby. We're almost to the shelter." But the pinch had been growing for months. It wasn't a pinch anymore. By the time they reached the corner of Franklin and 8th, Terrence stopped walking altogether. His shoulders tightened. His jaw clenched. Pamela watched the pain wash across his face like a shadow stretching over the moon. "Daddy." He didn't answer. His right knee buckled first. Then the left. His fingers slipped from Pamela's grasp as his legs folded beneath him like a collapsing bridge. He crashed onto the freezing sidewalk, gasping, hands digging into the pavement, trying to crawl away from a pain that lived inside him. "Daddy!" Pamela dropped to her knees, shaking him. "Daddy, what's happening? What do I do?" Terence couldn't speak. His legs seized violently, locking at the hip and shaking as if some invisible current ran through him. Pamela tried to press them down, to steady him, but his body jerked uncontrollably. His breath came in broken, shallow stabs. His eyes squeezed shut. Passers-by kept walking, fast. Some stared, some turned away, some crossed the street to avoid getting involved. Finally, a man with a briefcase muttered, "Call an ambulance." But he didn't stop. Pamela fumbled for Terence's phone, but it had died earlier. So she screamed for help, her voice bouncing off brick walls, lost to the winter air. A woman approached at last. "What happened?" "I don't know," Pamela cried. "His legs, he can't move. Please call someone." The woman dialed. Pamela held her father's head in her lap, snowflakes melting into his hair. "Stay with me, Daddy. Stay with me, please. Please." Another spasm tore through him, harsher than the rest. Pamela watched his face twist, not in fear, but in a kind of exhausted agony she'd never seen before. By the time the ambulance arrived, Terence's legs were rigid, frozen in a painful angle. 2 EMTs knelt beside him, checking vitals, asking rapid-fire questions Pamela barely understood. One EMT pulled Pamela aside. "Does he have insurance?" She shook her head. We don't have anything." The EMT exhaled, the kind of exhale adults gave when they already knew the ending. "Well, take him to County. It's the only place that won't turn him away." But County was overflowing that night. They waited in the hallway because no rooms were open. Terence lay on a gurney, teeth chattering, breathing shallowly. Pamela held his hand and stroked it with her tiny thumb. Nurses rushed past. Doctors shouted codes. People cried. Pamela begged anyone in scrubs for help. "He needs something," she said. "He's hurting. Please." Most didn't respond. One finally answered. "We're short-staffed. He'll be seen when someone becomes available." But no one became available. Terence's spasms weakened. His breaths shortened. His fingertips turned cold. At 2:14 a.m., in a crowded hallway with fluorescent lights flickering overhead, Pamela felt his hand loosen inside hers. His chest rose one last time, then fell and did not rise again. She shook him frantically. "No, Daddy, Daddy, wake up. Please wake up." He didn't. A nurse eventually placed a blanket over his face. Pamela stared at it, waiting for him to move underneath, waiting for the blanket to shift. It never did. Hours later, social services arrived. They tried gentle voices, soft questions, offers to find a placement, but the placement was temporary. The help inconsistent, the promises weak. Pamela drifted from one overcrowded building to another until eventually she drifted out altogether. The street became home. Concrete became bed. Silence became comfort. But something else grew alongside the grief, something fierce. The night after her father died, Pamela sat outside the very hospital that had let him fade away. Snow gathered around her boots. Wind scraped her cheeks. She held her father's old duffel bag on her lap, pulling his work jacket over her shoulders like armor. She stared at the hospital windows, bright squares where silhouettes moved, doctors and nurses saving lives behind glass she couldn't reach. Her voice cracked as she whispered to the cold air. "If they want help people like us, I'll learn to do it myself." From that moment, she lived by the vow. She dug anatomy textbooks out of dumpsters behind City College. Some were missing pages. Some were soaked with rain. She dried them by stolen heat vents, flattening each wrinkled sheet with patient fingers. She watched medical DVDs she found in thrift store bins, scratched discs that froze every few minutes. She'd smack the old sidewalk TV shed dragged from an alley until the picture returned, absorbing every diagram, every explanation, rewinding again and again. She used public library computers until closing time, hunched over videos of spinal releases, hip nerve adjustments, emergency corrections for sacral compression. She memorized what she saw, whispering each step under her breath. Iliac crest, sciatic notch, piriformis angle. She whispered them as she walked, as she scavenged for food, as she fell asleep hungry beneath the overpass, using her father's jacket as a pillow. Her voice became a mantra. Her mind became a machine. She pressed her thumbs into her own hips, practicing angles and pressure on herself. Practicing on old dolls she found in donation bins. Practicing on tree trunks, trying to understand leverage and force. And slowly, quietly, an obsession rooted itself inside her. Not madness, not desperation, genius. A year of studying shadows, pages, screens, silhouettes. A year of feeding her mind because nothing else fed her. By the time Pamela found the torn therapy manual behind the country club, her eyes didn't just read the diagrams, they recognized them. She could see the condition before it happened. The way her father used to shift in early stages. The way Michael Schmidt shifted that afternoon. She knew. Not because of luck. Not because of guessing. Because a little girl had turned heartbreak into knowledge. Because she had sworn she would never again watch someone die the way her father had. Her obsession had begun. Her genius had awakened. After her father's death, the city changed shape for Pamela. Buildings became textbooks. Windows became classrooms. Every alley carried echoes of medical terms she repeated like prayers. But no place pulled her more powerfully than St. Matthew's Hospital. It began with a rumor she overheard while warming her hands near a hospital side vent. 2 nurses were smoking, their voices low but clear. "Did you see the little ghost last night?" One whispered. "The silhouette outside Trauma Wing 4? Yeah. Creepy. Like a kid, just standing there. Halloween's still months away, Lisa." They both laughed nervously. Pamela froze behind the dumpster, listening. A kid-shaped shadow in the hospital window? It had to be someone else. Someone braver. But that night, as hunger gnawed at her and cold seeped through her father's jacket, she thought about those windows, bright squares filled with knowledge she needed more than shelter, more than food. So she went. It was 1:22 a.m. when she slipped behind the hedge line bordering the trauma wing. The bushes were tall enough to hide her if she crouched low. Leaves brushed her cheeks as she pressed forward, inching close to the lit windows. Inside, a physical therapist adjusted a patient's leg, explaining something to a resident. "Compression here," he said. "Release from the sacral base. Watch the angle." Pamela held her breath. Her fingers curled into the soil. There it was again. Words she recognized from library videos and dumpster textbooks. But here, they weren't diagrams. They were real hands on real bodies. She shifted for a better view, careful not to rustle leaves. Her silhouette cast faintly against the glass. A nurse passing through the hallway glanced up briefly, then froze, staring. Pamela ducked instantly, but not before hearing the nurse murmur, "There it is again. The ghost kid." She didn't look again. Pamela waited until the nurse moved away, then rose slowly to re-watch the therapist's demonstration. She memorized the posture, the pressure of the thumbs, the angle of the resident's hold, the exact second the patient exhaled in relief. It became her ritual. Night after night, she slipped through shadows and crouched behind the bushes, unseen by most and misunderstood by all. A rumor grew among the staff of St. Matthew's. "There's a child outside the trauma wing windows. Looks like a black silhouette. Always watching. Never comes inside. Probably a reflection. No, too small for that. A ghost, then. To them, it was a harmless mystery. To Pamela, it was school. She learned the rhythm of rounds. Trauma wing lit up at 10 p.m., midnight. 2 a.m. residents moved like dancers, swift, precise, exhausted. She learned to read their faces, their mistakes, their corrections. She watched nerve block demonstrations, the insertion points, the stabilization techniques, the way the attending guided the residents' trembling hands. She observed physical therapy resets, hip rotations, lumbar decompressions, sacral adjustments. She whispered along with what she learned. L4 root, sciatic notch, decompress here. Her breath fogged the window. Her fingers ached from gripping the sill. But she didn't move until the lesson ended. Her mind became a living atlas. Each night she returned to her cardboard and blanket shelter beneath the overpass with new knowledge buzzing inside her skull. She practiced angles on cardboard tubes, old paper towel rolls she rescued from trash bins. She pressed her thumbs into rolled-up shirts, timing herself with a cracked watch shed found near the bus station. 20 seconds. Hold at 20. Adjust the angle. She used bricks to measure her pressure strength. A smaller brick was 8 pounds. 2 stacked equaled roughly 14. She practiced pushing them with the same force she saw the residents use, her tiny fingers red and aching afterward. Sometimes she'd whisper to the dark. Again. And she'd reset her posture. Reset her grip. Reset her stance. Her body became its own training tool. Her brain, its own instructor. Weeks passed. Then months. By spring, the trauma wing staff grew more convinced the silhouette was a ghost. Sometimes nurses joked about it during breaks. Some even tried peeking through the blinds, but Pamela always vanished the moment someone looked directly at the glass. She moved with the instinct of a stray cat, silent, quick, gone in a blink. But one night, everything changed. She saw a resident perform a maneuver unlike any she'd watched before, a sacral lumbar realignment. The exact pattern of pain, paralysis, and hip lock she remembered from her father's last hours. The resident stood behind the patient, adjusting their hips carefully. "This is for acute nerve collapse," the attending said. "Rare, but when it hits fast." Pamela's heart slammed in her chest. Rare. Fast. Exactly what had killed Terence. She leaned closer, absorbing every detail. The angle of the push. The counterpressure at the sacrum. The resident's thumbs pressing deep into the lower back. The attending's instructions, calm and exacting. Feel for the tight band. When you find it, apply sustained pressure. Nerve release is instantaneous. 20 to 30 seconds. The patient groaned. Pamela winced. She watched the resident follow through, watched the patient gasp at the sudden pop inside their spine. Then the relief. It hit her like lightning. This was it. This was the moment her father never got. This was what could have saved him. When the session ended and the lights dimmed, she slipped back beneath the bushes, but her mind replayed the maneuver endlessly. Back under the overpass, she practiced on a rolled sleeping bag, whispering every instruction she heard. She practiced until her thumbs throbbed, until the moon sank, until her body begged for rest. She didn't stop. Not when her stomach ached. Not even when weather turned cruel. Not even when exhaustion blurred her vision. She had a mission carved from grief. She studied until she could visualize the lumbar nerves blindfolded. Until she could trace the sacral pathways with her fingertips in the dark. Until she knew exactly how long 20 seconds felt, without counting, without thinking. She trained until precision became instinct. She memorized the realignment so thoroughly that even months later, even standing on the country club patio facing Michael Schmidt's shifting posture, she felt it in her bones. This is the same thing. This is my father's condition. I know this. I can fix this. One night, after finishing a late practice session on her makeshift training dummy, she sat cross-legged beneath the overpass, her breath steadying as she whispered to the silent city. If it ever happens again, I have to be ready. It wasn't a wish. It was a promise. Night pressed down beneath the old overpass like a damp, unkind hand. The concrete ribs above Pamela groaned whenever trucks rolled across, shaking loose dust that drifted onto her blanket, a frayed airport throw someone had tossed out 3 winters ago. The cold was the first thing she felt every morning, the last thing she tasted each night. It crept into her clothes, into her bones, into the soft tissue beneath her fingernails. The rats felt it too. They skittered close for warmth, watching her with their black, patient eyes. She didn't bother shooing them anymore. They were tenants, just like her, and the rent here was pain. Some nights she pretended they were welcoming committee. Tonight they were territorial. Pamela thumped her heel once, sharply. A warning. They scattered. Rainwater curled down the pillar in a thin line, dripping onto the plastic sheet she had stretched across the dirt. She hissed through her teeth, annoyed but unsurprised. Everything under the overpass leaked, the concrete, the sky, her thoughts. She crouched, tugged the sheet tighter, and sat cross-legged on the flattened cardboard she used as bedding. It had once held bulk packs of sparkling water. The brand logo still shined with cheerful blue droplets that mocked her. Her stomach growled. It had been hours since Shed managed to find anything remotely edible. Hunger gnawed at her in slow, steady waves, but Shed long since learned not to fight it. Fighting wasted energy. Accepting kept her alive. She exhaled and reached for her backpack, a frayed nylon thing, gray with road dust and burned at the edges. Inside, wrapped in 2 layers of grocery bags, was her medical library. She slid it out gently, reverently. The Ziploc bag was thick with moisture-wrinkled papers, scavenged printouts, photocopies Shed begged from libraries before they banned her, sketches Shed drawn from memory. Notes scribbled in the margins like prayers. She unzipped it and sifted through the collection until she found the pages she needed. Michael's symptoms, what Shed seen in him the night before, still pulsed in her mind in sharp detail. The soft droop at the edge of his mouth, the tremor he tried to hide by clenching his hands, the subtle way his knee collapsed inward with every few steps, like a hinge going soft. She spread the papers across her lap, diagrams of peripheral nerves, printouts of case studies on degenerative neuropathy, the copied page from an old neurology textbook showing patterns of nerve sheath degradation. And then her father's file, not really a file, just a handful of notes Shed written as a child while watching him decline. Crayon sketches at first, later ballpoint scribbles. She had documented what no one else believed was real. Her father's collapse had started not with pain, but with silence, nerves going dark like streetlights losing power. The same pattern Shed seen in Michael. She traced a finger along the diagrams. Not random, she whispered, though no one was listening except the rats, who didn't care. Not coincidence. Same sequence. Same order. Her pulse thudded in her throat. She had studied hundreds of cases in the past 2 years. None matched this pattern except one. Her father. She leaned back against the pillar, feeling the grit bite through her shirt. The overpass groaned overhead as trucks passed, each vibration shuddering through the concrete like a tired sigh. Pamela closed her eyes. Patterns calmed her, even terrible ones. Eventually, the noise of the city dulled into a distant hum, and only the sound of dripping water remained. She gathered the papers back into the Ziploc, pressing the seal tight, and tucked it close to her chest before returning it to her backpack. The weight of it grounded her. Her stomach tightened again, sharper this time. She swallowed, grimaced, and stood. The night air bit at her bare forearms, colder than it had any right to be in late spring. She hugged herself as she stepped out from beneath the overpass. Food. She needed food. Most nights she scavenged behind dumpsters or along the bike path where joggers dropped half-finished energy bars. But tonight, the wind carried something else. Something warm, savory, rich. Her senses sharpened instantly. She lifted her head, sniffed the air, and turned slowly until the scent grew stronger. Roasted something. Bread. Maybe meat. Her stomach cramped with anticipation. She followed the smell. Through the trees, across the ditch, up the slope. The foliage thickened around her, brambles catching her clothes, wet leaves brushing her ankles. She pushed through them like a sleepwalker chasing a dream she didn't trust but couldn't abandon. The scent grew stronger with every step. Her breath puffed in the cold as she crested the small ridge. Below, tucked behind a row of manicured shrubs, lights glowed softly against the night. Gold, warm, and unreal. The country club. She'd seen it only from a distance before, an impossible place full of people who seemed made of money and laughter. But the wind carried its dinner scraps to her like a lure, and tonight she was starving enough to follow. She descended the slope, careful not to slip. Her shoes were worn through at the toes, and mud oozed in as she stepped. She didn't care. Hunger made her brave. At the bottom, she crouched behind the shrubs and peered through the branches. Cars gleamed in the parking lot. Soft music drifted from the patio. The smell of food, real food, rich food, wrapped around her, dizzying. Pamela inhaled shakily. She hadn't come expecting anything. Not fate. Not luck. Only scraps if she was fortunate. But then she heard it. Laughter. Bright and careless, carried on the breeze from deeper within the trees. Not the laughter of the dining patio. This was different. Closer. Younger. A cluster of voices, rising and falling, echoing faintly through the night. Pamela straightened. Slowly, almost against her own will, she stepped away from the shrubs and toward the sound, each footfall deliberate, drawn forward by something she couldn't name. The laughter shimmered through the darkness like a beacon, and she walked toward it. She stepped out from the trees and toward the sound, each footfall deliberate, stitched with a hunger that had nothing to do with food. The laughter shimmered through the night like a torch. The country club patio bloomed into view. Linen, low conversation, clinking crystal, a dozen candles in windless glass. Men in blazers and women in silk leaned back in designer chairs, their faces lit by soft light and the easy glow of other people's money. Pamela kept to the shadow of a decorative planter until she could see them clearly, a semicircle of well-fed faces, glasses raised. At the center, carved from confidence and arrogance, sat Michael Schmidt. The wheelchair was an extension of him. Polished carbon fiber, custom cushions, an accessory of status more than necessity. He laughed with the practiced timing of someone used to ruling rooms. Her voice was small, the word please shone almost foreign sound on her tongue. Sir, can I get some of your leftovers? Heads turned as if her whisper had detonated. For a single second, she felt the weight of every pair of eyes, curious, irritated, hungry for spectacle. Her knees trembled, but she stayed close to the shrubs, palms cool against dirt. Michael smiled that way rich men smile when they're choosing amusement. Get this dirty monkey away from my table before she begs someone else's leftovers or gives us all some disease, he said, loud enough that the patio's laughter swelled like a wave. The words landed heavy, catching in the throat of the summer air. The circle erupted. Phones rose like obedient birds. Snapshots and short clips already lived in the palm of someone's hand. Women looked away, embarrassed on behalf of their class. Men guffawed with the reflex of privilege. Pamela wrapped her hands tighter against herself, the insult burning, but she'd learned to hold the sting beneath her ribs. She'd learned to move like she belonged less than she did. She answered only with truth because truth was the easiest armor she had. Her voice cracked. I'm hungry. Pamela studies his posture, sees the nerve pattern, and quietly says, your left hip. Your nerve is collapsing. You need to sit differently or it'll get worse. Michael's grin widened, theatrical and cruel. He leaned back, elbow on silk napkin, and offered the joke like a caramel aftertaste. How about this? Heal my dead legs for $1 million. Laughter burst again, hot, brittle, as if the idea were a comic skit. Some shouted jokes back. Someone made a video kissing the air with mock seriousness. It was a reward for cruelty, attention, the cheapest currency of the night. Pamela's chest tightened, memories uncoiled behind her eyes, the same micro-twitch, the same guarded inhale Shed watched in her father's last hours. She whispered before she knew Shed spoken, "I know what that is." Michael waved her off as a child would shoo a fly. The crowd was still laughing, and their laughter was a blanket she had no right to lift. But the wind shifted and carried something else, an edge of fear, a different kind of attention. The mockery hung in the air, sharp and foolish, when Michael's left leg snapped. At first, a few people laughed nervously, thinking another bit of his show. Then the left leg jolted again, violent enough that the footrest rattled and a woman's wine tipped, spilling a dark comet across the linen. His right leg followed. A coincidence became a collapse. Michael's face went from amused to alarm in the breath between jokes. His hands clawed for the wheelchair rails as if to anchor in the world. Breath hitched, short, labored, the sound of someone trying to translate panic. He reached for words, but the syllables refused to form. His body convulsed, a puppet jerked by unseen strings. The thin veneer of spectacle fractured. The on-site doctor, an earnest man in a white polo, shoved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who'd passed a course and now wore authority like a badge. "He's having a vascular event," he announced, voice loud enough to try to close discussion. "Possible clot. Step back. Give him room." People obeyed the shape of medical language the way they obeyed money, without understanding, with deference. Phones continued to record. The glare of small screens added a cold metallic hush to the night. Pamela's world narrowed to the same pattern Shed practiced in nightmares. The leg collapse. The grinding buckle at the hip. The frantic breath. The out-of-order muscle response. The same sequence had burned her awake the night her father died. In the crowd's panic, she could hear the ambulance's siren echoing from a place that had already happened, that had been decided by bureaucracy and indifference. Her legs moved before her mind gave permission. She stepped away from the planter, leaving the safety of shadow for the hot stare of the patio. Security paused, hands twitching toward radios and the familiar script of removal. Cameras pivoted to her like hungry birds. "I know what this is," she said, louder now, the sound cutting through the plastic hum. Her voice held a strange, steady calm, like a scalpel disguised as a child's whisper. "Move." The on-site doctor's face flushed. "Lady, you can't." "Move," she said it again, not a demand so much as an order tempered by certainty. The circle broke, curiosity and fear and ridicule tangling into something else. A few guests muttered, uncertain how to treat a child who interrupted their entertainment. She dropped to her knees beside Michael without asking. The stone bit into her palms and knees, but she didn't notice. The air smelled of wine and lemon and something like old money. It tasted wrong against the metallic tang of adrenaline. Michael's torso arched as another spasm hit. His fingers clawed at the rails, then relaxed, then tightened. His jaw worked. His eyes searched the crowd as if pleading for a script that would tell him how to stop. Pamela saw the slackening at the base of his spine, the microfold where pressure had stolen function. The image of her father, flattened at the edge of a hospital hallway, rose to meet her training like two ghosts recognizing one another. Her hands hovered near his lower back, memory and study and practice guiding the motion. Her palms knew the angle. Her thumbs remembered the pressure. Her breath counted the seconds Shed committed to memory in the moonlight beneath the overpass. "This isn't vascular," she said, to no one and to everyone. "It's neurological. It's mechanical, nerve trap. Sacral compression." Michael tried to form a word. His lips moved, useless. She bent closer until only he could hear her. Your sacral nerve is trapped, she whispered. Her voice was tender and urgent at once. I can fix it. Please, just give me 21 seconds. Let me. For a moment, the entire patio hung in a breathless electric stillness, every laugh, every insult, every half-finished drink frozen midair. Pamela's words hovered like a spell cast over the wealthy crowd. I can fix it. Please, just give me 21 seconds. Let me. Michael stared at her through shock-sharpened eyes, his body racked by spasms, his fingers slipping from the rails. He couldn't speak, couldn't nod. But the fear in his face was permission enough. Pamela moved. She positioned herself behind his chair the way she'd practiced 1,000 times beneath an overpass, under flickering street lamps, on scraps of cardboard shaped into human forms. She placed her thumb along the ridge of his sacrum, her other hand bracing at the lumbar base. Her posture dropped low, precise, steady. The patio watched, confused and horrified, as if they were witnessing a crime or a miracle and couldn't yet decide which. What is she doing? A man whispered, hand trembling around a $400 glass of wine. This is insane, another muttered. Get her away from him. But no one moved. Not security, not the club doctor, not even the guests with phones lifted high. Something about Pamela's focus, her quiet, terrifying certainty, held them inert. She inhaled slowly. This has to be perfect, she whispered, not to Michael, not to the crowd, just to herself. Her thumbs angled to exactly 45 degrees. She found the precise tract of the nerve the moment it tightened beneath her touch. A place she knew as intimately as breath. The crowd leaned in without meaning to. A woman's voice broke the silence, wavering. She said, 21 seconds, right? Someone else snorted. Fine. Let the feral girl have her countdown. Then, as if summoned by some unseen conductor, voices, mocking, terrified, awestruck, merged into a single tense rhythm. 1. Pamela applied pressure. 8, maybe 10 pounds. The same weight as a single brick. The same pressure shed practiced on the cold ground night after night. Her vision flickered. An EMT pushing her aside. Her father gasping. His legs twisting violently. No rooms available. Hell be seen when someone becomes available. Her tiny fingers gripping his hand as it went cold. 2. Snowflakes melting in his hair. 3. A hospital window glowing like a lighthouse. 4. Bodies moving behind glass she could never reach. The silhouette of a therapist's hands adjusting a patient's hips. 5. Her father's back arching from the sidewalk. His voice breaking into silence. 6. Pamela blinked hard. Someone shouted at her to stop. Someone else whispered to keep going. 7. She glanced at Michael's face, contorted, fighting for breath, but not fading. Not slipping away like her father. Not yet. 8. 9. Her thumbs dug deeper, holding steady. Her muscles shook from strain, but she didn't move. 10, 11, 12. The club doctor stepped forward, then froze. Even he didn't dare interrupt. 13. Her mind replayed a training video that had skipped every 6 seconds on a scratched DVD. The image freezing, breaking, returning. She remembered the exact motion the practitioner had demonstrated. 14. Nurses whispering about a ghost at the trauma window. 15. Her breath fogging the glass. Her fingers gripping the sill. 16. Her father lying on a gurney in a hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. 17. 18. Michael's breath hitched, a sharp, strangled sound. 19. Pamela tightened her stance. 20. Everything inside her focused into a needlepoint of force and memory. 21. Pop. The sound cracked like a knuckle but deeper, biological, seismic. A pressure release that echoed through the patio like thunder swallowed by velvet. Michael's entire torso collapsed inward, then expanded in a shuddering inhale, the first full breath had taken since the spasms began. Every head jerked forward. Michael's legs, moments ago braced in violent rigidity, slackened. The spasm vanished like a ghost fleeing daylight. His toes twitched. His calves flexed. One knee bent, then the other, slow and trembling, as if awakening from a long winter sleep. Pamela stumbled back, breath ragged, hands trembling with fatigue and memory. She waited, terrified she'd been wrong. Terrified she'd hear nothing, see nothing. Terrified she'd feel what she felt in that hospital hallway 1 year ago. But Michael inhaled again, steady, deep. Then he moved. First a small shift in his hips, then a lift, tiny but unmistakable. The air seemed to split in half. A woman gasped so sharply she nearly dropped her champagne. Michael's fingers found the wheelchair arms and squeezed. His knuckles whitened with effort. He pulled. Muscles in his legs fired, weak, shaking, but alive. He rose. 1/2 inch. Then 3. Then 6. His body fought gravity with a year's worth of atrophy and disbelief. His breath trembled like a man stepping into a new world. Pamela watched with both hands pressed flat against her thighs to keep from collapsing. Her heart hammered. The patio blurred. She didn't blink. Michael stood fully, trembling, swaying, on 2 legs that had once failed him completely. A scream tore through the night. Someone dropped a phone. Someone else shouted for God. A man swore loudly and repeatedly. A woman burst into tears so violently she covered her mouth with both hands. The wealthy crowd surged back, chairs scraping, drinks spilling, voices shaking with awe and fear and a kind of wild disbelief that money could not protect them from. Michael stared down at his own legs as if they belonged to someone else. Pamela exhaled, her entire body shaking. Her father's face flickered through her mind, not in pain, but in peace. For the first time since he died, the memory didn't slice her open. Silence swept the patio, raw, holy, unreal. Finally, someone spoke. A woman in a silver dress stepped forward, tears streaming, voice trembling so badly she could barely form the words. She covered her mouth, breath catching. She healed him. The patio erupted around the truth she had just named. And Pamela Rivers, child of an overpass, ghost in a hospital window, stood in the center of it all, hands still trembling, the echo of 21 seconds humming in her bones. For a moment, the world existed only in the space between Michael's shaking breath and Pamela's trembling fingers. He was standing, really standing, leaning on nothing, supported by no one. And the patio, packed with wealthy diners who moments earlier had been laughing at her, now stared as if witnessing something biblical. Then someone screamed. Not in fear, something closer to awe and panic fused together. A chair scraped. A cocktail glass shattered. And in the swirl of confusion, one woman, already crying from witnessing the pop, fumbled her phone and lifted it again, recording, babbling something incoherent about miracles and spine injuries and that little girl. The first video hit the internet 43 seconds later. By the time Michael blinked, trying to adjust to the sensation of weight in his legs again, the patio buzzed with the frantic chimes and vibrations of notifications erupting on phones. Some people backed away as if the air around Pamela had been electrified. Others edged closer, half whispering, half praying. Michael steadied himself on the corner of a table. He wasn't falling. He wasn't collapsing. He was upright, heart pounding with adrenaline and something he had forgotten he was capable of feeling. Hope. Pamela took one step back, spine rigid, eyes darting. The noise was rising. Too much. Too fast. A man in a linen suit shouted, "This is going viral. Look at this. My brother already sent it to me and he's in Dubai." Another diner pointed at Pamela, hand trembling. "Who are you? What did you do to him?" Pamela flinched. Michael saw it, saw the old fear slam into her like a wave. He moved immediately, instinctively, stepping between her and the growing cluster of phones. She doesn't want to talk, he said sharply. The patio doors burst open. Not EMS. Not security. News crews. Actual news crews. Two vans had pulled into the driveway so quickly they'd nearly hit each other. The patio filled with bodies wearing press badges, swinging cameras onto shoulders, shouting overlapping questions. Lights flicked on, bathing the scene in harsh artificial glare. Is this the girl from the video? What did she do to his spine? Are you claiming a medical miracle? Is this a hoax? Michael tried to raise his hands to block the cameras, but his muscles were still recalibrating and trembled. Pamela stood behind him like a shadow, silent, overwhelmed, one hand pressed to her stomach as if bracing for impact. One of the reporters shoved a mic toward them. Sir, can you walk for us? Can you confirm? Back up, Michael said, voice low and commanding. Give her space. A second news van skidded in behind the first. Then a third. Then a fourth. Sirens wailed somewhere down the hill, not EMS yet, but police responding to reports of a dangerous scene. Word had spread too fast, too wildly. The world was reacting in real time to something it did not know how to process. Dr. Bennett arrived before the paramedics. She wasn't from the area. She happened to be across the street at a luncheon, having just finished a presentation on emerging neurosurgical ethics. A colleague had shown her the video. Shed walked out mid-sentence, leaving her half-eaten meal behind. She pushed through the reporters with her badge raised. Move. Move. I need to see him. Michael recognized her immediately. Dr. Bennett? You've worked on cases like mine. She didn't answer at first. Her eyes had locked on Pamela. Not suspiciously. Not judgmentally. Recognizingly. Her lips parted as though she were seeing a ghost materialize from the smoke of a long-forgotten fire. She stepped closer, voice soft enough that only Pamela heard. You're the child from our window. Pamela froze. Her lungs forgot how to breathe. Dr. Bennett continued, barely above a whisper, eyes glossing with realization. The girl outside the neurosurgery wing. The one who stood by the glass every night, watching procedures no child should have been able to understand. Pamela shook her head once, tiny, fragile. No, that wasn't me. But her voice cracked. Michael glanced back at her. What is she talking about? The noise of the reporters faded as if swallowed by the moment. Dr. Bennett wasn't angry. She wasn't accusing. She looked stunned. Reverent. I've wondered for years, she murmured, hands trembling slightly. You couldn't have been older than 7. You watched every operation I performed. You mimicked the motions, even the rare techniques. You were absorbing them. Pamela stepped back as though retreating from a wildfire. Michael caught her wrist gently. Hey, breathe. I've got you. Cameras flashed in their faces. The press had sensed the shift. She has a medical background? Was she trained in secret? Is she some kind of prodigy? Is any of this even legal? Pamela squeezed her eyes shut, shoulders curling. She hated attention, hated eyes on her. She had spent her life disappearing, not being discovered. Her chest heaved, like she was trying to compress herself into something smaller than fear. Michael turned to the crowd, voice rising with a clarity that surprised even him. She saved my life, he said. Every camera pivoted toward him. She realigned my spine when no one else could. When 3 clinics said I'd never walk again. When 9 months of PT failed to give me a single step, he gestured to his legs, shaking, but holding him upright. This girl, this brilliant girl, did what entire teams of specialists couldn't. Pamela's breath hitched. Michael wasn't finished. She is the most gifted medical mind I have ever met in my entire life, he said, each word cutting through the chaos like a bell. "And am not letting any of you treat her like a sideshow." The reporters erupted. "What's her name? Was this experimental treatment? Is she certified? How did she learn spinal realignment? Is she a threat to the medical establishment? Is she being exploited? Did she heal anyone else?" Pamela pressed into Michael's back, hiding completely now, her fingers gripping his shirt with white-knuckled desperation. He shifted slightly, creating a barrier between her and the storm. "Enough," he growled. "Back off." But the crowd only surged closer. Pamela's voice, small, breaking, finally emerged. "Michael, please." He lowered his head so she could hear him over the noise. "I'm right here. You're safe." A reporter shouted. "Is she refusing to speak because she's guilty of something?" Michael snapped around so fast the reporter recoiled. "She's refusing to speak because she's a child," he said sharply. "A child who just performed a miracle." The word hung in the air, miracle, and cameras clicked like a field of cicadas awakening at once. Police entered the patio then, pushing through the mass of bodies. More vans arrived at the end of the driveway. More reporters. More lights. The world was finding out. Pamela's face pressed into Michael's shoulder, hiding from all of it. And as the officers struggled to form a perimeter and the news anchors began their breathless live coverage, the only thing the cameras captured clearly was a terrified girl clinging to the man she had just brought back to life. The elevator doors slid shut, sealing out the echo of reporters and flashing cameras below. Pamela stood pressed against Michael's side, silent, her fingers curled into the fabric of his jacket. His legs were still unsteady, but he held himself upright, almost stubbornly, leaning only enough to keep her close. As the elevator ascended, the world below pulsed and roared with the chaos of a miracle no one knew how to interpret. Up here, behind polished steel and soft lighting, everything was suddenly quiet. Too quiet. Pamela's breathing was shallow and rapid, a trembling rhythm she couldn't calm. When the elevator opened into the penthouse, she froze. It was the largest place she had ever seen, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, glass shelves with sculptures, and a kitchen bigger than the entire underpass where she used to sleep. She didn't step inside at first. She hovered in the doorway like she expected someone to push her back out. Michael rested one hand on the frame for balance. "Come in," he said softly. "Please. You're safe up here." She followed in tiny, hesitant steps, her eyes darting around, checking corners, checking exits, checking for threats that didn't exist. He noticed. He understood. He didn't rush her. Instead, he crossed to the marble kitchen island where a neat stack of documents already lay arranged. His assistant had dropped them off earlier when Head called from the patio. The city lights behind him cast a bright silver outline around his silhouette. "Pamela," he said gently, "there's something I need to do for you. Something I've wanted to do since the day I found you at the bus stop." She looked up at him, arms wrapped around herself like she needed to hold her ribs together. "You don't owe me anything," she whispered. "I didn't fix you because I wanted things." "I know," he said. "That's why this isn't payment. It's protection." He pulled the first document forward and placed it on the counter. A deed. Her name printed at the top. Her real name. Her whole name. "This is your housing deed," he said quietly. "Permanent. This penthouse is legally yours. Not a lease. Not a loan. Not my name on it with yours underneath. Your home. Forever." Pamela's throat bobbed once in disbelief. He slid the second document forward. "Enrollment papers," he said. "One of the top private academies in the state. Full scholarship. You'll never have to fight for a desk again." She stared at the paper as if it were written in another language. He pushed the third folder toward her. "A medical trust fund. Several $1 million allocated for your education, medical licenses, equipment, anything you need. No one can touch it. Not even me. Her breath trembled. She stepped closer to the counter, fingertips brushing the edges of the folders like she needed to make sure they were real. And this, Michael lifted the final document, his voice catching with something raw. This is a mentorship acceptance. Dr. Bennett wrote it herself. She wants you shadowing her team. Officially. Legally. No more watching from windows. Pamela swayed slightly, overwhelmed. Her eyes filled, but she blinked hard, refusing to let tears fall yet. Michael exhaled. All you've done these past years, learning alone, surviving alone. You don't have to do that anymore. She shook her head slowly, almost violently, like her brain couldn't make the pieces fit. Why would you do all this for me? Michael steadied himself on the counter, his newly awakened muscles quivering beneath him. He wasn't crying, but only barely. Because you saved my life, he said. Not just today. Not just my spine. You rescued the part of me that stopped believing anything could ever get better. She stared at him, completely still. And because, he added, voice breaking at the edges, you're a child. You shouldn't be navigating danger alone. You shouldn't be scared of people. You shouldn't be wandering the streets wondering where to sleep. He stopped. He swallowed. His voice dropped to a whisper. You deserve a life. Pamela's face crumpled. For a moment she didn't speak at all. Then, in a voice so small it nearly vanished into the quiet penthouse, she asked, Will I ever have to sleep under the bridge again? The question pierced him. Completely, utterly. Michael's hand slammed down on the counter as if he needed to brace himself. His breath stuttered, and when he looked at her, his eyes were glassy with unmistakable grief. Never, he said. Not while I'm alive. Those words hung in the air, heavy, absolute, unbreakable. Pamela blinked rapidly, as though trying to decide whether to believe him, whether to let herself accept something she had never been offered in her entire life, security. He didn't push her. He didn't tell her she had to feel safe. He simply held out his hand. She stepped toward him, not because she trusted safety, but because she trusted him. Her small hand landed in his with this tentative, trembling weight, and he closed his fingers gently around hers. Come on, he said. There's something you should see. He led her down the hallway into a bedroom with a window that looked out over the glittering city. Soft lighting. A rug. A dresser. A closet with hangers she could fill. And the bed, white, neatly made, piled with pillows and a thick fluffy blanket folded at the foot. Pamela stared at it like it was a museum exhibit. You can sleep here, Michael said. Tonight. Tomorrow. Every night after. She took one step. Then another. Her hand reached out, trembling uncontrollably, and she touched the blanket, pressing her palm into the softness, the warmth, the impossibly safe texture of it. Her breath broke. A tiny, cracked sound escaped her throat. Then suddenly, all at once, she climbed onto the bed, curled into the blanket, and pulled it around herself like she expected it to vanish if she didn't hold it tight enough. She didn't sob loudly. She didn't wail. She just cried, quiet, shaking, the kind of crying that comes from years of holding everything in. Michael stood at the doorway, watching over her, making sure she saw his silhouette before sleep pulled her under. For the first time in her life, Pamela cried herself to sleep. Safe. The world did not quiet down after the miracle. If anything, it roared even louder. Pamela woke the next morning wrapped in the same blanket she had cried herself to sleep in, the city glowing pale gold through the enormous window. For a moment she forgot where she was. The softness beneath her, the warmth around her, it was all so foreign her breath caught in panic. Then she saw the doorway. Michael stood there, leaning gently on the frame, not imposing, not watching, just making sure she wasn't afraid. You're safe, he murmured. It was only then that she exhaled. But outside the penthouse, the world was far from calm. Within 12 hours, every major news outlet in the country had dug into her life. They found the police reports from the overpass, the missing person file that had never been followed up, and then, most damning of all, the medical report from the night her father died. The words "denied treatment due to lack of coverage" spread across headlines like a national wound ripped open. The public response was instantaneous and explosive. Protests surged across hospital districts. Hashtags flooded every platform. People demanded change, demanded accountability, demanded answers. And at the center of it all, whether she wanted to be or not, was Pamela. Her small face, her trembling voice, her hands that had brought a man back to his feet. An entire country looked at her and saw hope. Michael's boardroom was filled to the walls. Executives, doctors, legal teams, hospital administrators from every sector. Camera crews waited outside. Pamela stood near the window, quiet, clutching her Ziploc bag of scavenged medical notes like armor. Michael addressed the room with the commanding steadiness of a man who now walked again. "We failed her father," he said plainly. "Our system failed thousands like him. And no child should have to teach themselves medicine under a bridge because hospitals lock their doors." A murmur rippled through the room. Shame, discomfort, agreement. "That ends now," he said. "Today, we launched the Rivers Reform Initiative." The name hit Pamela like a physical blow. She lowered her eyes, shoulders trembling. Michael continued, voice firm. "Every participating hospital will adopt an unconditional emergency treatment policy. No denials. No insurance discrimination. No legal loopholes. Lives first, paperwork second." A hospital CEO raised his hand. "This will cost billions. And saving lives is worth every cent," Michael shot back, leaving no room for argument. Dr. Bennett stepped forward, her white coat stark against the boardroom's glass and steel. Her eyes softened when they met Pamela's. "This initiative is about returning medicine to its purpose," she said. "And it starts by supporting those who still believe in that purpose." She walked toward Pamela and knelt, not out of condescension, but reverence. "I want to mentor you," she said quietly. "Not as a symbol. As a future colleague." Pamela blinked fast, stunned. I'm just a kid." "You're a prodigy," Dr. Bennett corrected. "And prodigies become pioneers." Michael smiled gently. "You won't be alone this time." Pamela pressed a hand over her heart, head bowing as if trying to hold herself together. Later that afternoon, Michael drove her somewhere she hadn't expected, back toward the place she had run from for months. The cemetery. Her father's resting place sat beneath a struggling maple tree, grass patchy, marker plain. No flowers. No visitors. Only silence. Pamela stepped toward it slowly. Her knees hit the ground before she realized she was kneeling. Her fingers brushed the carved letters of his name, tracing the edges like she used to trace the diagrams in her scavenged books. For a long time she didn't speak. Then she leaned forward, whispered, "I did it, Daddy." Her voice cracked. She pressed her forehead against the cold stone. "No one else will die like you. I promise." Wind rustled through the weak branches above her. Somewhere deep in her chest, the years of hunger, fear, cold, and grief loosened, not gone, but no longer strangling her. Michael kept his distance, giving her the space she never had the night she became an orphan. When she finally stood, her eyes were swollen but steady. "Ready to go?" he asked softly. She nodded. Not as a girl who survived. As a girl who was beginning to live. That evening, back at the penthouse, the city sparkled beneath a dark sky. News helicopters circled like mechanical moths, broadcasting updates about the initiative, about protests already shifting into national policy discussions, about the stranger-than-fiction rise of a homeless girl who healed a millionaire. But Pamela didn't watch the TV. She stepped out onto the balcony, leaning her small hands on the railing. The wind lifted her hair as she stared out over a world she had once only observed from below freeway pillars and broken sidewalks. Down there, she had been invisible. Up here, the city lights seemed to look back at her. Doors had opened, real doors, not dumpsters behind restaurants or hospital entrances she wasn't allowed to cross. Behind her, Michael and Dr. Bennett spoke quietly about next steps: applications, tutoring, future plans, medical pathways. All for her. But Pamela just breathed. For the first time, her breath didn't shake. She reached into her pocket and touched the Ziploc bag of notes, the only possession she had carried through her entire survival. The papers were worn, edges curled, ink smudged. They had carried her as far as they could. Now she carried herself. She lifted her chin, staring out across the bright, breathing world, the world that finally saw her, the world she would one day change. Pamela Rivers stood tall on the balcony. No longer invisible. No longer homeless. On the path to becoming the youngest medical pioneer in history. Thank you for reading this story to the end. If you believe a child should never have to sleep under a bridge, if you believe no one should be denied help because they're poor, if you believe courage can come from the most unexpected places, then hit the subscribe button and like the video. Only those who turn away from suffering, who hide behind wealth, status, and excuses, would ignore what Pamela lived through. Don't be like them. Stand for compassion. Stand for change. And if you believe every life deserves dignity, whisper it in the comments. Everyone deserves a chance.